Welcome back to the live CUBE coverage here in Las Vegas, Dell Tech World 2026. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante. Jem Allen's out getting stories. She's also here hosting a great lineup here. We're going to talk about cyber resilience and where it all fits in as the AI infrastructure is setting the agenda for the operating model. Of course, that brings in agentic, and you got to see the role of the data platforms and automated data platforms. The key story, the data and the agents working together. Simon Jelley, Vice President, Product Management, Dell Technologies. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on. Rob Emsley, as usual, CUBE alumni, back again. Director, Cyber Resilience Marketing at Dell
Great to
Technologies. See you. Guys, there's so many storylines coming out of Dell Technologies World this year because you got the AI infrastructure build out, that's happening, we're seeing that, AI factories. You got the agentic layer happening. You got the automation of orchestrations going on. You got private cloud back in the mix again on hybrid. That's opening up AI operations. Cyber resilience is on top of that too, and at the end of the day, this is all kind of coming together. It's not like a separate piece part. They've been brought together, almost built for purpose, built to order.
Right.
These are words that Dell's used to hearing. The AI factories are shipping as rack scale. So, we're seeing great advancements, GPU utilization almost 100% on the racks. That's unheard of. People are trying to put it together. That's like homebrew computing in the AI infrastructure meets now the racks. Cyber resilience is a key part of that, so start out by telling us what's been the big change this year. We saw the announcements, but give us the overview of the big change.
To your point around it's all coming together around the data and the infrastructure. And critically what you need there is obviously the resilience and the protection of that data to provide the backbone of that innovation. And really what we're trying to change in our announcement with PowerProtect One that we made yesterday is how do we continue to help manage that complex world through simplicity. Right, bring together the capabilities we've had, always had that longevity and history and legendary innovation around being able to provide that resilient protection through data domain. We've added to that more and more innovation around our data manager layer. How do you have to access those content sources, pull that data in? Protection for the AI factory was something we built day one in terms of with our integration with PowerProtect. And now adding that simplification layer in terms of managing it all through a single interface and down as a stack moving forwards.
Rob, we've been following the journey on backup, recovery, restoring, now cyber resilience. Even years ago, it's changed a lot. Dave's going deep on research right now around the role of protecting the data, which is great, but now you got agentic. You can't really glob them together on that, so this is a distinction, super important call out because it sounds nuanced, but it's super important because you got to have them both working together.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the data layer that's still the crown jewels. Whether or not the data has been interacted by a human or a digital agent, the data is still the data. And that's what we have to be hyper-focused at making sure that we look after. And I think that's the one thing that continues to be a kind of a consistent thread. The one of the things that we're absolutely going to take advantage of is that we have a lot of that data running on Dell Technologies infrastructure. And I think that becomes a unique opportunity for us, and we've already started to take advantage of that. So when we think about PowerProtect, it isn't just to generate copies of that data to store within PowerProtect infrastructure, but it's also to interact with that data wherever it lives. And especially when you think about the PowerStore franchise, and you think about the PowerScale franchise, a lot of that data is what's being connected up into the AI pipelines, and PowerProtect is already starting to expand its ability to orchestrate the protection of that data in situ. So, in March when we got together in the RSA conference, the functionality that we introduced was integration with PowerStore, in-place anomaly detection of PowerStore snapshots, but that's just the beginning of our ability to use PowerProtect as a control plane across all of the places that we're looking after data.
So Simon, most companies are still sort of obviously doing the traditional backup and recovery. How do you guys think about the difference between backup and recovery and what cyber resilience is?
Right, so I think as Rob already started, part of it is cyber resilience really starts from making sure you've not just got a framework for how you're protecting that good policy, jobs management, but are you also looking at things like anomaly detection? Are you thinking about understanding what your mean time to recover, mean time to detect, and what that minimal viable business is? So it's talking at a different language level in terms of how does the data relate to the actual business itself and the infrastructure services that you're trying to deliver. That's one piece that we're delivering through this central control plane in terms of what we're building. The other piece is it's around that security in terms of the data. Like, I think there's a lot of vendors in the market that say backup equals cyber. The reason I joined Dell fairly recently is because I think Dell has really that whole end-to-end offering of thinking about not just building that control layer at a different layer, how do you integrate that into the AI ops so you can drive that infrastructure, but it also has the componentry in terms of building that security in from the silicon up. Right, in terms of being able to provide that secure supply control chain, and then complementing that with building the cyber capabilities into the primary storage, into our consumer devices, and then providing the advisory services, the managed detect responses services, the instant recovery services. So really we're solving the whole house of cyber with Dell rather than just looking at one room of just what backup means. Cyber is a much bigger topic for customers.
And how do agents change the equation? How does that affect the products that you build and how you deploy them and how customers use them?
So I would say two things, speed and governance at the end of the day, right? The threat is evolving more quickly than ever with agents, and that's why having this secure, isolated, immutable layer, which is a core differentiation for how we build our portfolio, is necessary, right? Governance is necessary, but governance, as unfortunately we know, is never 100% guaranteed. So number one is the speed of threat, making sure you've truly got that isolated, immutable, intelligent recovery layer, so that if governance broken, you've still got that fallback position. That's something that we've done for years within the portfolio, and we're promoting back to customers to really make sure they've got that guarantee in place. But the other is having that governance, and that's why now this evolved into PowerProtect One, and this universal view of where your data is, what's the anomalies that are happening across it, where are the agents particularly infecting you as you move closer to the edge again, right? There's more of that compute happening in the edge around AI development, that you're back to kind of re-protecting the edge, which has kind of been a trend that we've shifted away from in the protection space overall as well.
How should we think about that immutability? What are the deployment options that customers have? What do you consider best practice? Is it air gap? Do a lot of customers just say, I'm happy with something locally? Could you describe the options?
Yeah, I mean, immutability within the PowerProtect portfolio is not new. I mean, we've had it in the portfolio forever. I mean, I think that some of our competition tries to suggest that we haven't. But immutability has been part of the data domain portfolio, and one would argue that the way we deliver immutability, we deliver it in a couple of modes. One of those modes is you ain't changing anything, whether or not you have the security credentials or not. And that, to some customers is, well, we love that. To some customers he says, oh, I made a mistake. It's like, can you fix it? No, it's immutable. So some of the way that we deliver immutability within the data domain portfolio is fundamentally different than what software-based immutability, where you're controlling it from the backup administration sort of management credentials. But then when you combine that into data domains that you put into an isolated network and into an isolated vault, then it just becomes even a different beast, because even the control of that environment is not done from the production side, it's done from the vault side. It's like going into your hotel and having a little version of yourself running in the hotel vault and opening it on your behalf, no keypad on the outside. That's something that no other vendor is doing, and that is why we have over 2,700 customers that have deployed on-premises cyber recovery vaults, because they know that that's the way that gives them the almost 100% certainty that the data they have in that vault is clean and recoverable.
Right.
And the name of the game is to put in that vault your minimal viable company.
Right.
And that's the the part of the infrastructure and the data and the applications that your company needs to get back online and survive from an outage.
And that's not necessarily always air-gapped, but you would presumably recommend that it is, or how do you,
no,
how
that, that configuration, we would definitely recommend is air-gapped. Certainly, we have customers that recover from their data domain backups day in and day out.
Right.
I mean, and I think that's the fundamental foundation, but when you implement the Vault, it just adds this additional level of isolation, which then sort of takes the backup data out of the attack surface of your production systems. Because backups are in the same attack surface as your production systems, because they have to be, because they're creating backups.
I go back to the point I made earlier, like ultimately, the speed of threat is fundamentally massively increased, right, in terms of AI agents there. And regardless if we talk immutability or isolation, it all becomes back, can you guarantee recovery?
Yeah.
Right, and there's definitely a good, better, best there. Immutability on its own is good. Best, certainly in terms of isolation, but better is certainly with isolation. But best is then, can you bring the intelligence to that isolated recovery? Right, and that's where we've added the cyber detect capabilities on the primary piece to ultimately drive that detection earlier, not just in what we provide in the Vault, but earlier in that food chain as well.
On that best scenario, Dave mentioned agents. AI generally is going to help here. One of the things that's clear to me on this show is that it's not just the GPUs as AI. You can certainly have the big AI effect, but the AI effect is going to be smaller, but it's also install base, existing estates of IT. How is the AI changed the CPU equation? Because there's more discussion of the role of the CPU, the shift there, because costs are so high on the GPUs. John Rose said, you don't want to use GPUs to bake a burrito. I forget what his line was, but it's basically, don't use the big expensive stuff that do trivial things. But he wasn't trying to make that the case. He made, like, you can use CPUs aggressively.
Right.
Talk about that dynamic, because it's now part of the factory. You get the data plane, data layer. What's the role of the CPU? How do you guys see that playing out?
Well, I think for us it's interesting, I would say the whole dynamic around supply chain, hardware cost, CPU, has really changed the dynamic in terms of scale up is sexy again, right? I mean, I think that's the big dynamic that's shifted, frankly, in terms of how we look at it. And scale up is something that we built our, again, legendary status on. And the cost to really go from, before there was this trend around hyper-converged, start small and scale out, that is now a very costly exercise and potentially a big risk, and I've wrote a number of articles on that in terms of how do we reposition scale up and really get the maximum throughut and capacity from that.
By the way,
that's because of NAND pricing, is that right? Yeah, right. I mean,
CPU,
so scale out is HCI is a memory pig.
Right,
absolutely.
So,
exactly.
And latency too. I got to say, what's coming out of the show is the economic angle, not just tokens.
Yeah.
Your point about costs.
Absolutely.
On the scale up versus scale out, it's a huge deal.
Yeah, and one is can you even, you decide to start small today, can you guarantee the supply is even going to be there when you try to scale up? And the cost economics that's going to be in, I jokingly said to someone, hey, what if you go back in a year from now, even 3 months from now, going back and purchasing, the price differential is going to be massive. And again, we've already got significant TCO advantages in terms of looking at the amount of server CPU memory you need to deploy to get to those petabytes of scale compared to the HCI competitors.
How does the TCO change with the scale-up systems well engineered the way they're coming out? You notice any observations around some of the TCO calculations? Is there things jumping out at you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we did, with the reality of NAND pricing was look at the HCI vendors that were out there and did a straight comparison of, if you need this amount of capacity from a backup storage perspective, what is the architecture going to look like? So if you just take our PowerProtect data domain system for the enterprise, until today, it supported 1.5 petabytes of usable capacity. So we did an analysis of, if you configure that with an HCI equivalent, with the expectation that I need this amount of capacity on premises, what does the HCI alternative architectures look like? For Dell, we do 1.5 petabytes of capacity with a single compute node. And that single compute node has 14 SSDs in it for caching and the operating system. you're done. You start looking at the competition, and you start getting up to 1 server compared to 36 servers. And then you go, 36 servers, or appliances, are actually 4 servers per appliance in a 2U rack space. So you go from 36 to 192. So the economics, you can just seeing how much different CPU componentry you require, and then you factor in the reality of SSDs and memory are fluctuating tremendously. So we're seeing competitive architectures being quoted at double the price. And that's only part of the equation, because the pricing is only one thing, the availability of supply is the other piece.
Yeah.
Because if you're going through a tech refresh, you may not even be able to get the units to refresh an HCI architecture.
And the other piece, the spin with the AI frontier models now and the increased vulnerability threat vector, again, the more kit you're putting out there, the more the vulnerability, the patching, the updates you need to do on multiple systems.
You're chasing your tail, basically.
Yeah, exactly, going round and round.
Yeah.
As the convert, you guys mentioned RSA, last decade you probably wouldn't have been there, you might have been lurking, or maybe not. But so you guys are increasingly targeting a different persona. First of all, does the CISO wake up thinking about cyber resilience? Is that something you have to educate the market on? Is it a fundamental component of cybersecurity? And what are those conversations like with the CISO specifically?
It's certainly, I joke about this, it's certainly for data protection, it's taking it from a back room where we assume someone's doing it to it's on the C-level agenda, typically with the CISO, maybe chief data officers in terms of how they're promoting it. So absolutely it is. I think the challenge, and this is where we're trying we are bringing together that unified view of where is your data from a cyber control perspective, is there isn't something today within the CISO toolset that really helps you understand where your data estate is and what's the actual anomaly status currently, where's the vulnerability status, where's the recovery perspective, am I able to look at my minimal viable company, am I able to see what my mean time to recover is going to be, and feed that into my SIMSOAR tools that sit above that, right? And that's the gap we're trying to solve. I think there's an interesting tension as to who brings that forward, the data owners versus the CISO coming down to that, but we certainly believe there's a missing need of providing that level of observability within the data space overall.
On the PowerProtect One, it aligns a lot with a lot of the simplicity and the packaging.
Yep.
Yes.
How does that continue? Because you pointed out the other scenario, not very simple, you're kind of cobbling it together, my word, not yours, but you're kind of cobbling it together. Where does the simplification come in? Because now think about, you get the supply, you got the capacity.
Yeah.
What's the operational impact to the operator, builder, investor?
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about PowerProtect One just in terms of the turnkey solution it brings for those greenfield environments, particularly at that what I call kind of the managed edge. But more importantly is where it signals in terms of the future. So I'd say architecturally, one of the things that's critical is it's a disaggregated architecture. So while you buy it, deploy it as one solution, the actual management node from the storage node is disaggregated. So in the future, we're going to be able to enable you to have larger models of data domain and storage in the back end, or go to a one-to-many configuration in terms of moving forward. So you're not having to scale in the same way, the challenge of
and by the way, when you bring
HCI.
the edge to the equation, disaggregated infrastructure is the wave that's coming.
Exactly.
We love these centralized factories.
Right.
But that's just today.
Right, so it's absolutely the way forwards, and again, it allows you to not hit that scale challenge that we've had more, Rob very adequately described earlier. But the second piece, again, is that operationally bringing that single view in terms of not just your backup status, but your cyber posture overall with your data. And that, today that's linked directly into the PowerProtect One offering, but that is going to start to span our whole storage portfolio moving forward. So tying in CyberDetect, CyberSense, Cyber Vault within that moving forwards.
So, okay, so you mentioned observability. We talked about security. Where do compliance and privacy fit? I mean, you have access to the data, you've got analytics around that. How do they fit in? How are customers thinking about that?
So, I think from again, this is part of what we're trying to provide observability to into the data, is driving those separate lanes, not just of what your protection and recovery status is, but understanding where your data is, where does it apply from a sovereignty perspective. We're certainly seeing that privacy and sovereignty is a big rising topic for customers, and again, that's why we provide the disaggregated architecture, because you may need to deploy certain storage silos, deduplicated storage silos in particular locations, and then equally we work with our DD cloud layer so we can work with sovereign clouds, for example, as they become more available to customers themselves.
Okay, so the observability then feeds
exactly, it's
the edicts layer around compliance and privacy and data location, data locality.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, I know Dell talked about a while ago, this concept of, it's all about immutability, isolation, and intelligence. Yeah. That's really what we're providing in terms of that layer on the data itself.
And by disaggregated, you're talking about being able to scale compute independent of the capacity, correct?
Correct, exactly, yeah. We don't want to fall foul of the HCI type of models where those things have to scale together. The reality is we appreciate customers are going to need to scale over time, but they still want to keep the management and the operation simple, right? They don't want to add more overhead there.
It's interesting, just an observation is that cyber resilience, I love that name, who doesn't like cyber resilience? You bring it on every day. It's more table stakes, it's embedded in everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're talking about cyber recovery. You mentioned, this is what people want. That's the business that you're in, is to protect and recover. So you got protect in the name, so that's just security. Yeah. It's everywhere. But the recovery is where the action is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we train our sellers and our partners about 3 keywords when it comes to cyber resilience. It's secure, detect, and recover. And it's in that order. I mean, so secure is about reducing the attack surface. Detect is about detecting and responding to threats. And as you say, recover from cyber attacks at the end of the day is what the customers expect when they need it.
When it's most critical.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
Their business is on the line.
Exactly. Well, and I think, look, the reality is that
hopefully you don't get there, but you. Oh yeah. The odds are.
Oh, the odds are
hackers' favor.
Yeah,
most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the one thing I just add to that is, come that recovery, you want to make sure you've rehearsed. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not something you want to, while the news is focused on your business and why you're not operating, you don't want to be saying, well, we've never tried this before, we've never done it before. And again, one of the critical reasons we mentioned back to a point earlier on, better is that truly isolated intelligence layer, is it gives you that ability to do those rehearsed recoveries, right? Yeah. In many different firewalls and random ways overall.
Well, there was a day where people wouldn't even test the recovery because it was too risky.
Absolutely.
I presume that's changed, right? Our customers...
It worries me how much that has maybe not changed.
Well, you run a digital twin easily, now you got digital twins, all kinds of options.
That's what we're enabling now, right? That's the reality. I think it was very hard from how do you spin up that infrastructure, and again, what commonly was happening was either you weren't testing, or you were testing the run but you knew would work, right? You kind of passed the test. The reality is you need it to be randomized, and again, that's where you're kind of leveraging those on-demand environments to be able to spin up quickly, randomize the test sets. AI is going to actually be a contributor to helping there, right, in terms of randomizing the vulnerability. So it's definitely both a risk and a tool in terms of how we help customers.
So speaking of digital twins, I mean, this is forward-looking, and I'd love for your thoughts on this. I mean, it's not going to happen. It might take the better part of a decade to play out, but Jeff Clark was talking about the changing operating model. He talked about tokens are going to be a line item in your P&L.
Yeah.
It seems like a North Star would be to have a true single version of the truth, a digital twin of my organization. People, things, places, processes, the sort of corporate knowledge in a real-time state. Do you envision a day where you're actually recovering the state of the enterprise?
I think that's ultimately where we're going towards in terms of looking at it not being about data protection, but true business continuity, is we've got to be able to, today we back up assets based on a job and a RTO and an RPO. The reality is, as Rob already mentioned, we've got to get back to what's that minimal viable company. Because you've got to make sure all the pieces of that infrastructure come back, including how does that meet with the agents you're currently running? How do you reestablish those agents in a running model moving forward? So that's absolutely the aim of where we're going towards. It's changing the language from RPOs and RTOs to we're bringing back your minimal viable company, and we've already mapped out what that looks like moving forward.
Well guys, the AI infrastructure, the AI factories are going to pull a lot more revenue from your group is going to be bundled in, and as the enterprises adopt AI factories and connect to them,
yes,
that's going to be that's the architecture that was laid out here.
Yes.
I buy that. People aren't going to throw shade on that. That's the future. I guess my final question is, what's next on the roadmap? How are you getting the word out? Put a plug in for what's going on and what's coming next, and what are you focused on?
So look, we're continuing to focus on, one, how do we make what is a very complex situation more simple, right? So again, we're building on PowerProtect One. Initially, this is launched more into those greenfield environments. How do we help bring this to our existing customers so we simplify their deployments, particularly in reducing that operational burden and cost? And then the big piece is now, how do we leverage AI in terms of driving the simplification of their day-to-day? There's a lot where we can bring the agent kind of concept into day-to-day backup routines, right? How do we ultimately say, typically a backup admin sits down, looks at what happened overnight, and then approves a bunch of jobs, figures out a bunch of jobs to go fix what, it had the wrong disk location, we need to do a recovery here. Those are all things we can pretty quickly automate, and we're already showing concepts of where we'll go in the next few months in terms of delivering that and integrating that. So operationally, efficiently driving the business is the key focus of where we move
I love
forward.
that North Star, digitizing the business, having it always on, ready to go, ready to come into the game,
Right.
so to speak. Simon, Rob, great to have you on, and congratulations, great announcement. Again, recovery is what everyone wants, good progress. Thanks for sharing on the
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you
All right.
very much.
I'm
Great
John
to see
Furrier
you.
with Dave Vellante here at Dell Tech World, unpacking the major trends, the AI infrastructure is an operating model. We're seeing a lot more economics, the cost of doing business, new TCO calculations. Of course, the data layer is key, and of course, rack scale systems coming online, opening up the edge, coming soon, and of course, the rise of the client, AI PC, all happening here at Dell Technologies World. Thanks for watching.